The moment you hesitate, the world doesn't pause out of respect. It moves, it reallocates. It gives the outcome to the person already in motion, and then it lets you sit there and rename your delay as timing, as not meant to be, as I'll do it when I'm ready. When you and I both know the truth is colder than that. You waited for certainty in a world that rewards initiation. Most of what you regret isn't even dramatic. It's quiet. It's the sentence you swallowed because you didn't want tension. It's the boundary you felt in your chest but didn't enforce because you didn't want to be seen as difficult. It's the opportunity you circled like a cautious animal, telling yourself you were being strategic, when the real reason you didn't move was fear of missing, fear of looking stupid, fear of being judged, fear of making it real and then having to live with the outcome. And every time you chose comfort over clarity, you trained your life to treat you like a man who negotiates with his own knowing. That's where the unnamed way begins. Not in aggression, not in performance, not in loud confidence. It begins in internal posture, the speed of your decisions, the cleanliness of your standards, the silence you can hold without scrambling to explain yourself, the ability to feel fear and still move before fear builds a cage. The hunter mentality isn't loud. It's early. It doesn't beg for permission. It doesn't wait for approval. It doesn't need the room to understand. It moves because it has already decided what it tolerates and what it doesn't. Look around and you'll see the separation without needing anyone to preach it. One type of person lives as if life is a conversation, as if opportunities politely queue up, as if respect arrives because it should, as if conflict is always a sign of immaturity. Another type of person lives as if life is terrain, neutral, indifferent, efficient, and in terrain, hesitation isn't a moral flaw, it's a tax. The longer you hesitate, the more you pay. And the payment isn't always money. Sometimes it's momentum. Sometimes it's self-respect. Sometimes it's years. Sometimes it's the slow humiliation of watching someone else take what you were already capable of, simply because they moved while you were still negotiating. Stoicism was built for this. Not for aesthetics, not for quoting emperors, for governance, for the ability to stand in pressure and not donate your nervous system to noise. The world is not going to stop creating friction. People are not going to stop testing boundaries. Events are not going to become gentle just because you are. So the Stoic question isn't, how do I avoid conflict? It's, how do I remain sovereign when conflict appears? Because sovereignty is what keeps you from being steered by guilt, urgency, fear, or the desperate need to be understood. This is why the first law in your text, move first, hits deeper when it's stripped of bravado. It isn't about overpowering others. It's about overpowering delay. It's about refusing to let the old habit of negotiation make you late to your own life. Because the gap between knowing and acting is where most men lose. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack talent, because they lack immediacy. They keep thinking they need more time, when what they really need is fewer pauses disguised as thinking. Thinking is useful when it produces clarity. It's poison when it produces postponement. And here's the part that stings if you're honest. Every time you broke your own rule, you taught your mind you cannot be trusted. Every time you said, I'm done, and then went back, every time you promised yourself tomorrow, and then stayed the same, every time you saw the red flag and ignored it, you fed the identity of a man whose standards move under pressure. That identity becomes your default. Then you wonder why you hesitate. You hesitate because your subconscious has evidence you won't follow through. And a man who doesn't trust himself becomes slow by nature, not because he's weak, but because his inner system expects betrayal from him. The second law, create imbalance, sounds violent until you remember how change actually happens. Nothing upgrades while everything stays intact. If your life is perfectly balanced, perfectly predictable, perfectly safe, it usually means one thing. You have stopped climbing. Balance can be a beautiful thing for a man who has already built something, but balance becomes a coffin for a man who is still meant to rise. You cannot build a new life on top of an old one you're trying to preserve. Something has to crack. Some comfort has to be removed. Some attachment has to be cut. Some routine has to be disturbed. Not because chaos is noble, but because transformation requires friction, and friction does not negotiate. That friction is where identity is revealed. Balance hides weakness. Disturbance exposes it. When you remove comforts, you see what you used to call tiredness was often sedation. When you cut off what drains you, you see how addicted you were to familiar chaos. When you stop negotiating with your own standards, you see who you really are without the costume of excuses. This is why average men hate disruption, because disruption forces truth, and truth forces decisions, and decisions force consequences. Then the third law appears, and it's the one that separates presence from performance. Emotional climate control. Walk into any room, professional, social, intimate, and there's a temperature already set, a pace, a tension, an emotional current. Most men step into that current and immediately adapt. They mirror the energy, they soften their edges, they rush to be agreeable, they orbit someone else's gravity because orbiting feels safe. But the man who is built for command doesn't orbit, he anchors. He brings his own internal climate and lets the room adjust around it. The loudest man isn't the anchor, the most stable man is. Calm is not passivity, calm is dominance of the inner environment. When you remain unshaken while others search for footing, people defer without realizing they're doing it. Not because you demanded anything, because you're the only one not leaking. And leakage makes men predictable. Predictable men are manageable. Manageable men live lives that are decided by other people's moods. The fourth law, starve what weakens you, is where real change starts, and it's where most men pretend they don't understand. Weakness rarely shows up as obvious fear. It shows up as comfort, as just this once, as over-availability, as over-explaining, as chasing validation under the mask of honesty, as tolerating almost disciplined, almost committed, almost focused, because almost gives you the feeling of progress without forcing you to pay the cost of consequences. Power isn't built through addition first, it's built through subtraction, removing the habits that embarrass your potential, removing environments that sedate you, removing access from people who bring out the version of you that loses, removing the internal permission to break your own rules, because every time you break your own rule, you hand your future self a weaker spine, and the world can sense it. People don't always disrespect you because they hate you. They disrespect you because your boundaries don't bite. The fifth law, the shift from being chosen to being feared to lose, should be understood without games. Scarcity isn't manipulation, it's standards. Competence becomes leverage. Consistency becomes authority. Your time becomes expensive when you stop proving it's cheap with instant availability. Your presence becomes weight when you stop begging for attention. Your absence becomes consequence when you stop rewarding disrespect with continued access. This is not cruelty. This is self-respect made visible. And the final law is where everything gets quiet. Inevitability. Not motivation, not hype, not an emotional surge that fades by Friday. Structure, identity, repetition. The point where winning is no longer something you try to do. It becomes what happens when you follow the system you built and refuse to negotiate with the standard you set. After that, life doesn't feel easier. It feels simpler, because the inner debate reduces. The old version of you, the one who needed permission, needed certainty, needed to be understood, loses oxygen. Not through hatred, through starvation, through clean, repeated decisions, through becoming the kind of man who moves when he knows. Comment, Hunter, if this hits. Hit like if this feels like you, the real you, not the version that performs. Subscribe if you want more of this calm, stoic, hunter-minded framing, where discipline is identity and power is quiet. Once you see the cost of hesitation clearly, you don't unsee it. And after this, some paths close quietly behind you.